really pinpoint the purpose of his character. I guess it's just to kind of give maybe something else for Phoebe to work off of, but I don't know. Once again, I think it just kind of goes with the bloat of characters. And then, oh yeah, I guess there's a love interest for Trevor that's also in it, but it's barely even worth pointing out. So, yeah, like that's all the characters, and it felt so much, right? Like I understand you're trying to kind of figuratively pass the torch, which as we find out is really not happening at all. But like I get that you're trying to like kind of create your own self-sustained story, but why like just the flood of characters just to me doesn't work out. Like you have like almost 6 or 7 characters that are all new to us that you're trying to give some urgency for, and you're trying to do it, and it just fails in that concept. I don't know. How did you feel about just I guess the wealth of characters that we got presented with, or would there be something you would have changed with how they're trying to introduce everybody?
Well, I already mentioned what they should have done with the brother.
Sure, yes.
I kind of feel like with Trevor and podcast, I felt like they were both the comic relief, and I was like, well, I mean, if you need to have a comic relief character, typically you should have one, because it kind of feels like Trevor's the comic relief in the sense where he's just showing off how awkward he is as a teenager, and then podcast is the comic relief as someone who's like an outsider, like Phoebe, who's just trying to you know show how I guess interested he is in the world of ghost hunting and ghost busting.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, everyone kind of feels like comic relief though. Like even Phoebe tries to be like that because Paul Rudd. I would classify him as comic relief.
That's true. That's true.
Paul Rudd being Paul Rudd. So, but yeah.
But another thing too, because it's this trying to find its own voice, right? And you kind of get the feeling, okay, so it's definitely set in the Ghostbusters universe, and it's set years after Ghostbusters 2, but they're trying to do their own thing. They're trying to introduce these characters, and they want us to become invested in them because we're going to see them in future movies. And like I said before, they do a pretty good a pretty decent job in introducing characters that that become endearing to us, because like I said before, yes. Phoebe comes off as as very endearing, in spite of the fact that she's basically mini Egon. And Paul Rudd, well, there's nothing you can say bad about Paul Rudd. Yes. And even the mom, for all the fact, in spite of the fact that she's a total train wreck, you kind of, at the same time, you kind of do want to feel for her a little bit, because she is trying her best. But yes. So there's this buildup of these characters that that these are individual people who are slowly coming together. So when you get into the the second half of the movie, you kind of feel a bit of a big letdown, because it's like, well, we've invested all this time. Oh, by the way, here are the Ghostbusters. And you're like, okay, you totally took me out of the moment. You know?
No, I totally agree with you. I think it feels, it's very odd to me, right? Because like the first half of it, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm engaged. And then the second half of it, it just totally teeters off into nostalgia. I'm like, I don't know what they were thinking. Like if you just kept up with something new. But yeah, I guess we could definitely talk about that, because I feel like right around that point where they get arrested.
I was gonna say, you know what? Yeah. It reminded me of the Book of Boba Fett, because the first half of the miniseries, you become invested because Boba Fett is the character that we really, really cared about, and then the second half,
we didn't really care about Boba Fett, but I know what you're trying to say.
But then the second half, it just becomes Mandalorian season 2, so it's a bait and switch kind of deal. That's kind of what I get here,
No, I agree. Yes, it's very odd how they do that, and yeah, to me, it's like once they get put into jail, that's where everything right, and it's just so weird. It's just like, why would you want to put that in your movie? Like, why are you trying to make Egon look like a bad guy? Like, I just don't understand what they were thinking with making this characterization of Egon just like be this person that people hate. Like, we think of the Ghostbusters, we just think of the 4 of them goofing around and coming together to do stuff. It's so odd that you want to kind of paint him to be bad. I guess there's like some understanding of it, because like he took all their stuff and everything, but it's just like you had to think that Egon had a purpose for it. Like I don't know. That
Well,
to me really started to suck me out of the film because I'm like,
well, what,
why are you trying to
what,
do
what,
this again?
Well, what I was going to say was, what strikes me even odder is the fact that, Ray's telling her, "Oh yeah, he kept going on about some big event that was going on, and we didn't believe him." I'm like, "I'm sorry, you guys are the Ghostbusters. Like if there's anything weird happening, I would figure you'd be the first to believe."
Yeah,
Not to mention the fact that Ray runs an occult shop, right? So
yeah.
so
It
so
just
so he literally deals in stuff that's strange and bizarre. So for the fact that Ray, to say, "Oh yeah, we didn't believe Egon because he thought something big was coming," that's just, I mean, that's just a huge oxymoron right there.
yeah. It
Like, it
feels like
makes no sense.
it's like character assassination for Egon. Like it's just like that feels very out of character, and then
Yeah.
it just everything snowballs from there as far as the issues I had with it. So here's another thing that drives me crazy, and they did this in the second Ghostbusters. They did this in the Ghostbusters all female cast one. Why do people not believe in ghosts? Like, we literally have so much proof in the Ghostbuster universe about ghosts existing, but then, like, when they're talking with the officers, they just don't believe it. I'm like, you guys had to have noticed Muncher in town, right? Like, I get it's a small town, but like, all these people must have saw this weird entity that was like eating a fire hydrant and like going through windows and stuff. Like, I just hate when movies like just can't even stay consistent with what they're showing us on the screen.
And plus
Like, there's no
they kept going on about the big incident in Manhattan. I mean, you would figure that would have
yes,
made news. Oh,
yeah, no
well,
shit, yeah,
well, no,
like,
no, what you want to know what's even funnier is the fact that when they're chasing Muncher around, there hardly seems to be anybody around town. It
oh
is
yeah,
literally like a ghost town.
yeah,
I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? Like this,
yeah,
like, I know it's a small town, but even small towns have a lot of people in the downtown area in the middle of
sure.
the daytime.
Exactly, right? Like this is not like happening at night or something when we might expect the streets to be filled. I mean, like literally they're just like driving there. I mean, like we see cars lined up along the side, but we don't see any people outside. So it is very jarring. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of liked it.
I mean, you and me both, because it was actually nice. Even if it wasn't really Harold Ramis, it was still nice to see him there.
Yeah, and I get like I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about this, and I'm not. And like I said, I get it, right? Like, I wish he had a little bit less screen time and maybe like you could have done a little bit less with it, but like I get it. There's kind of a nice scene where you have the three original Ghostbusters lined up, and then Egon, while he's, helping Phoebe, is kind of also in the scene. So you kind of have all four of them lined up again. And it was nice to see. I know there's a lot of kind of conflicting things with how people feel about it, and
Mhm.
kind of using, kind of like this AI to kind of create a character or create a person that's dead. And, there's a lot of ramifications that I won't get into with that. But like I said, I think it did kind of have a little bit of a touching scene where everyone was able to kind of say their piece to him, which I enjoyed from like a movie telling standpoint.
And
Um,
it was a nice send off for Harold Ramis also.
yes,
So
yes, I agree. Because like I said, there's been a lot of issues with that. I know. Um, yeah, there's just a lot going on. It's a very heavy scene, and there's a lot of conflicting opinions on how it should have been addressed. It just was, like I said, nice for a lot of the characters to have that happen. So, luckily, with all of them together, they're able to defeat Gozer, and they win the day. So yeah, so how'd you like kind of the final sequence there as we kind of got to see more of Gozer and how everything kind of unraveled?
I kind of wish they went with with someone different. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I could sort of understand why they went with Gozer. For people who may not have been familiar with the previous movies, but at the same time, there's a reason why those two movies exist in the first place, right?
yeah,
Like, if you don't understand the references, go and watch those movies. Because because for me, if you're gonna do another Ghostbusters movie, you might as well just like continue with the narrative. Don't keep making all these references or kind of exposit on what's happened before. if you want to know what they're talking about or what happened, go and watch the original movies. But this movie is just going to move forward and go do its own thing. So, so for me, like, this movie is a good example of taking, one step forward, two steps back, right?
Yes.
It's like, because like I said before, I mean, the first half of the movie, like, there was so much promise because it's laying the foundation with these characters that that you really want to like, and you want to be emotionally invested in. But then it takes two steps back by just completely going down memory lane and just making about the three original Ghostbusters. Now, granted, like, I loved seeing, the original three in there. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I love the fact that they even brought Harold Ramis, as an AI back into that scene at the end. But if you're going to make a new Ghostbusters movie, or at least have characters carry on the Ghostbusters mantle, you kind of want them to, stand on their own, right?
Yes.
I kind of feel like they're sort of standing on their own, but they're being really, really, supported or heavily propped by, by the three, remaining figures who came before them.
Agreed. And I don't even find Gozer to be that interesting of a villain. So it's like I would understand it more if I thought Gozer had a lot more. I would say like interest. Like if I just don't get it. Like Gozer's just not interesting to me.
They should
So
have
it's
done more
like,
with Ivo Shandor. Like,
sure, yeah,
they kept building up about, oh, this is the town where Ivo Shandor got all this
yes,
material, and we see Ivo Shandor. I felt like you could have done more. I mean, they could have had Ivo Shandor kind of like return from the grave and kind of do all the things that Gozer would have done, right?
bingo. That's what I was thinking. Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking what would be interesting is if Ivo Shandor had some trap in place to take Gozer's powers, so he would have his own abilities.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Like, maybe Ivo Shandor was trying to kind of channeling the power of Gozer,
Yeah.
instead of having Gozer, itself pop
Yep.
up.
Yep.
So,
And then you could have had a perfectly good J.K. Simmons to totally sit there and eat the screen too, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. But no, they just
options were
decided,
there. So,
yeah,
but yeah, like I said, it just to me, I kind of look at it like, you know, they went with a different direction, right? I think they still kept some of the comedy beats to it, but it's not nearly as funny as the original one, not even close. So they clearly were wanting to go a different direction. They, I think they realized the error of their ways with the Ghostbusters 2020, with the Ghostbusters 2016 version.
mhm.
So, I think they went with something more serious. I just wish they had the guts to go all in on it, right? You built up the first half perfectly fine, and then to me, you just kind of squandered it in the second half, where you just focused too much on going down memory lane, like you said, too much on the other things that we've already seen before, when literally you could come up with any new story about a ghost, right? I mean, it's not like you have a lack of options there. You got so many things that you could choose from, and you just didn't do anything with it. I think if I was to give this a grade, right, I think I landed on, it was about, I would say maybe a 2.7 out of 5 ghost. I think, if you just kept up with the first part, this would have been a perfectly adequate film. But then, like I said, you just try to retread too much. And as someone that's seen the original one and, liked what the original ones were, it just felt too pandering to me to really get me involved with it. So what's your closing thoughts there?
I would probably give it a 2.9 ghosts. And I will say this, like, as someone who enjoyed the first two movies, it was gratifying to see the original Ghostbusters back in action.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've said before, I mean, if you're going to hand off the torch to the next generation, let them stand on their own. And let's remember too, this movie was directed by Jason Reitman, who is the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the
Yep.
original movies.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason appeared in the second Ghostbusters movie. So, so I'm a bit conflicted because, on the one hand, I can sort of understand he wants to, honor his father's legacy and trying to, make sure that it's, I mean, would you even call it a reboot, or is it more of a revival?
I would call it
Ghostbusters.
revival. I mean, because they definitely are like referencing and they make very
Yeah.
clear indication that it's in the. So, I mean, maybe it's just it's a sequel, right? I mean, it's they're all the original Ghostbusters are just older, so I'm just gonna call it a sequel. It's just a sequel that's 30 years apart.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I mean, what they've done so far, I kind of feel like maybe they didn't, go off, start off on the right foot. So, I mean, hopefully, Frozen Empire kind of rectifies, the issues that we've seen in Afterlife. But, from what I've seen so far, I really don't have too high of a hope for Frozen Empire. But we'll just have to wait and see. All right, well, that's going to do it for our review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. Let us know down in the comments below what you think. Do you agree with our talking points, or do you have another take? I mean, we're open to listening to your points of view. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next review. Take it easy.